Hello? Please do something. Okay. Hello, hello. Hello. Oh, just gonna continue off where we left in the morning. No, there's nothing. Okay. So yeah, we're just gonna continue where we left off in the morning. Hello, hello? Okay. The wind, however, did not grow as boisterous as might have been feared. It was not one of those tempests which burst and rushed on with the speed of 90 miles an hour. It continued fresh, but unhappily it remained obstinately in the southeast, rendering the sails useless. The 16th of December was the 75th day since Phileas Fogg's departure from London, and the Henrietta had not yet been seriously delayed. Half of the voyage was almost accomplished, and the worst localities had been passed. In summer, success would have been nigh certain. In winter, they were at mercy of the bad season. Passepartout said nothing, but he cherished hope in secret, and comforted himself with the reflection that, if the wind failed them, they might still count on the steam. On this day the engineer came on deck, went up to Mr. Fogg, and began to speak earnestly with him. Without knowing why, it was a presentiment. Perhaps Passepartout became vaguely uneasy. He would have given one of his ears to hear what the other engineer was saying. He finally managed to catch a few words, and was sure he heard his master say, "You are certain of what you tell me?" "Certain, sir," replied the engineer. "You must remember that, since we started, we have kept up hot fires in all our furnaces, and though we had coal enough to go on short steam from New York to Bordeaux, we haven't had enough to go with all steam from New York to Liverpool." "I will consider," replied Mr. Fogg. Passepartout understood it all. He was seized with mortal anxiety. The coal was giving out. Okay, wait, hold on. Is this better? I just realized it was kinda... Okay, I think this looks better. "Ah, if my master can get over that," muttered he, "he'll be a famous man." He could not help imparting to Fix what he had overheard. "Then you believe that we are really going to Liverpool?" "Of course." "As," replied the detective, shrugging his shoulders and turning on his heel. Passepartout was on the point of vigorously resenting the epithet, epithet, the reason of which he could not for the life of him comprehend. But he reflected that the unfortunate Fix was probably very much disappointed and humiliated in his self-esteem, after having so awkwardly followed a false scent around the world, and refrained. And now what course would Phileas Fogg adopt? It was difficult to imagine. Nevertheless, he seemed to have decided upon one, for that evening he sent for the engineer and said to him, "Feed all the fires until the coal is exhausted." A few moments after, the funnel of Henrietta vomited forth torrents of smoke. The vessel continued to proceed with all steam on, but on the 18th, the engineer, as he had predicted, announced that the coal would give in the course of the day. "Do not let the fires go down," replied Mr. Fogg. "Keep them up to the last. Let the valves be filled." Towards noon, Phileas Fogg, having ascertained their position, called Passepartout and ordered him to go for Captain Speedy. It was as if the honest fellow had been commanded to unchain a tiger. He went to the poop, saying to himself he will be like a madman. In a moment, with cries and oaths, a bomb appeared on the poop deck. The bomb was Captain Speedy. It was clear that he was on the point of bursting. "Where are we?" were the first words his anger permitted him to utter. Had the poor man been apoplectic, he could never have recovered from his paroxysm of Siam. I don't actually know how to pronounce that. Of Wrath. Where are we? He repeated, with purple face. 707 miles from Liverpool, replied Mr. Fogg, with imperturbable calmness. Pirate, cried Captain Speedy. I have sent for you, Sir Picaroon, sir, continued Mr. Fogg, to ask you to sell me your vessel. No, by all the devils, no. But I shall be obliged to burn her. Burn the Henrietta? Yes, at least the upper part of her. The coal has given out. Burn my vessel, cried Captain Speedy, who could scarcely pronounce the words. A vessel worth $50,000? Here are 60,000, replied Phileas Fogg, handing the captain a roll of bank bills. This had a prodigious effect on Andrew Speedy. An American had scarcely remained unmoved at the sight of $60,000. The captain forgot in an instant his anger, his imprisonment, and all his grudges against his passenger. The Henrietta was 20 years old. It was a great bargain. The bomb would not go off after all. Mr. Fogg had taken away the match. And I shall still have the iron hull, said the captain in a softer tone. The iron hull and the engine. Is it agreed? Agreed. And Andrew Speedy, seizing the bank notes, counted them and consigned them to his pocket. Sorry, I need to drink water. During this colloquy, Passepartout was as white as a sheet, and Fix seemed on the point of having an apoplectic fit. Nearly £20,000 had been expended, and Fogg left the hull and engine to the captain, that is, near the whole value of the craft. It was true, however, that £50,000 had been stolen from the bank. When Andrew Speedy pocketed the money, Mr. Fogg said to him, "Don't let this astonish you, sir. You must know that I shall lose £20,000 unless I arrive in London by a quarter before 9 in the evening of the 21st of December. I missed the steamer at New York, and as you refused to take me to Liverpool." "And I did well," cried Andrew Speedy, "for I've gained at least $40,000 by it." "Do you know," he added, more sedately, "do you know one thing, Captain Fogg? You've got something of the Yankee about you." And, having paid his passenger what he considered a high compliment, he was going away, when Mr. Fogg said, "This vessel now belongs to me?" "Certainly, from the nail to the truck of the mast. All the wood, that is. Have the interior seats, bunks, and frames pulled down and burn them." It was necessary to have dry wood to keep the steam up to its adequate pressure, and on that day the poop, cabin, bunks, and the spare deck were sacrificed. On the next day, the 19th of December, the masts, rafts, and spars were burned. The crew worked lustily, keeping up the fires. Passepartout hewed, cut, and sawed away with all his might. There was a perfect rage for demolition. The railings, fittings, the greater part of the deck, and top side disappeared on the 20th, and the Henrietta was now only a flat hulk. But on this day they sighted the Irish coast and Fastnet Light. By 10 in the evening they were pressing Queenstown. Phileas Fogg only had 24 hours more in which to get to London. That length of time was necessary to reach Liverpool with all that steam on, and the steam was about to give out altogether. "Sir," said Captain Speedy, who was now deeply interested in Mr. Fogg's project, "I really commiserate you. Everything is against you. We are only opposite Queenstown." "Ah," said Mr. Fogg, is that place where we see the lights Queenstown?" "Yes." "Can we enter the harbour?" Not under 3 hours, only at high tide. Stay, replied Mr. Fogg calmly, without betraying in his features that by a supreme inspiration he was about to attempt once more to conquer ill fortune. Queenstown is the Irish port at which the transatlantic steamers stop to put off the mails. These mails are carried to Dublin by express trains always held in readiness to start. From Dublin they are sent to Liverpool by the most rapid boats, and thus gain 12 hours on the Atlantic steamers. Phileas Fogg counted on gaining 12 hours in the same way. Instead of arriving at Liverpool the next evening by the Henrietta, he would be there by noon and would have time to reach London before a quarter before 9 in the evening. The Henrietta entered Queenstown harbour at 1 o'clock in the morning, and it then being high tide, and Phileas Fogg, after being grasped heartily by the hand of Captain Speedy, left that gentleman on the levelled hulk of his craft, which was still worth half what he had sold it for. The party went on shore at once. Fix was greatly tempted to arrest Mr. Fogg on the spot, but he did not. Why? What struggle was going on within him? Had he changed his mind about his man? Did he not understand that he had made a great mistake? He did not, however, abandon Mr. Fogg. They all got upon the train, which was just ready to start, and at 1:30, at dawn of day, they were in Dublin, and they lost no time in embarking on a steamer which, disdaining to rise upon the waves, invariably cut through them. Phileas Fogg at last disembarked on the Liverpool quay, only 20 minutes before 12, 21st December. He was only 6 hours distant from London. But at this moment Fix came up, put his hand upon Mr. Fogg's shoulder, and, showing his warrant, said, "You are really Phileas Fogg?" "I am. I arrest you in the Queen's name." Chapter Don't Know. In at which Phileas Fogg at last reaches London. Phileas Fogg was in prison. He had been shut up in the custom house, and he was to be transferred to London the next day. Passepartout, when he saw his master arrested, would have fallen upon Fix had he not been held back by some policemen. Aouda was thunderstruck at the suddenness of an event which she could not understand. Passepartout explained to her how it was that the honest and courageous Fogg was arrested as a robber. The young woman's heart revolted against so heinous a charge, and when she saw that she could do nothing to save her protector, she wept bitterly. As for Fix, he had arrested Mr. Fogg because it was his duty, whether Mr. Fogg was guilty or not. The thought then struck Passepartout that he was the cause of this new misfortune. Had he not concealed Fix's errand from his master? When Fix revealed his true character and purpose, why had he not told Mr. Fogg? If the latter had been warned, he would no doubt have given Fix proof of his innocence and satisfied him of his mistake. At least, Fix would not have continued his journey at the expense and on the heels of his master, only to arrest him the moment he set foot on English soil. Passepartout wept till he was blind and felt like blowing his brains out. Aouda and he had remained, despite the cold, under the portico of the custom house. Neither wished to leave the place. They both were anxious to see Mr. Fogg again. The gentleman was really ruined, and at that moment when he was about to attain his end. This arrest was fatal. Having arrived at Liverpool at 20 minutes before 12 on the 21st of December, he had till 9:15 that evening to reach the Reform Club. That is, 9 hours and a quarter. The journey from Liverpool to London was 6 hours. If anyone at this moment had entered the custom house, he would have found Mr. Fogg seated motionless, calm, and without apparent anger upon a wooden bench. He was not, it is true, resigned, but this last blow failed to force him into an outward betrayal of any emotion. Was he being devoured by one of those secret rages, all the more terrible because contained, and which only burst forth with an irresistible force at the last moment? No one could tell. There he sat, calmly waiting. For what? Did he still cherish hope? Did he believe now that the door of this prison was closed upon him, that he would succeed? However that may have been, Mr. Fogg carefully put his watch upon the table and observed the advancing hands. Not a word escaped his lips, but his look was singularly set and stern. This situation, in any event, was a terrible one. It might be thus stated. If Phileas Fogg was honest, he was ruined. If he was a knave, he was caught. The escape occurred to him. Did he examine to see if there were any practicable outlet from his prison? Did he think of escaping it? Possibly. For once he walked slowly around the room, but the door was locked, and the window heavily barred with iron rods. He sat down again and drew his journal from his pocket. On the line where these words were written, 21st December, Saturday, Liverpool, he added, 80th day, 11:40 a.m., and waited. The custom house clock struck 1. Mr. Fogg observed that his watch was 2 hours too fast. 2 hours! Admitting that he was at this moment taking an express train, he could reach London and Reform Club by a quarter before 9 p.m. His forehead slightly wrinkled. At 33 minutes past 2, he heard a singular noise outside, then a hasty opening of doors. Passepartout's voice was audible, and immediately that of Fix. Phileas Fogg's eyes brightened for a moment. The door swung open, and he saw Passepartout, Aouda, and Fix, who hurried towards him. Fix was out of breath, and his hair was in disorder. He could not speak. "Sir," he stammered, "sir, forgive me, most unfortunate resemblance. Robber arrested 3 days ago. You are free." Phileas Fogg was free. He walked to the detective, looked him steadily in the face, and with the only rapid motion he had ever made in his life, or which he ever would make, he drew his arms back, and with the precision of a machine, knocked Fix down. "Well hit," cried Passepartout. "Parbleu, that's what you might call a good application of English fists." Fix, who found himself on the floor, did not utter a word. He had only received his deserts. Mr. Fogg, Aouda, and Passepartout left the custom house without delay, got into a cab, and in a few moments descended at the station. Phileas Fogg asked if there was an express train about to leave for London. It was 40 minutes past 2. The express train had left 35 minutes before. Phileas Fogg then ordered a special train. There were several rapid locomotives on hand, but the railway arrangements did not permit the special train to leave until 3 o'clock. At that hour, Phileas Fogg, having stimulated the engineer by the offer of a generous reward, at last set out towards London with Aouda and his faithful servant. It was necessary to make the journey in 5 hours and a half, and this would have been easy on a clear road throughout. But there were forced delays, and when Mr. Fogg stepped from the train at the terminus, all the clocks in London were striking 10 minutes before 9. Having made the tour of the world, he was behindhand 5 minutes. He had lost the wager. In which Phileas Fogg does not have to repeat his orders to Passepartout twice. The dwellers in Savile Row would have been surprised the next day if they had been told that Phileas Fogg had returned home. His doors and windows were still closed. No appearance of change was visible. After leaving the station, Mr. Fogg gave Passepartout instructions to purchase some provisions and quietly went to his domicile. He bore his misfortune with his habitual tranquillity, ruined, and by the blundering of the detective. After having steadily traversed that long journey, overcome 100 obstacles, braved many dangers, and still found time to do good on the way, to fail near the goal by a sudden event which he could not have foreseen, and against which he was unarmed, it was terrible. But a few pounds were left of the large sum he had carried with him. There only remained of his fortune and the £20,000 deposited at Barings, so this amount he owed to his friends of the Reform Club. So great had been the expense of his tour that, even had he won, it would not have enriched him, and it is probable that he had not sought to enrich himself, being a man who rather laid wagers for honour's sake than for the stake proposed. But this wager totally ruined him. Mr. Fogg's course, however, was fully decided upon. He knew what remained for him to do. A room in the house in Savile Row was set apart for Aouda, who was overwhelmed with grief at her protector's misfortune. From the words Mr. Fig dropped, she saw that he was meditating some serious project. Knowing the Englishman governed by a fixed idea sometimes resort to the desperate expedient of suicide, Passepartout kept a narrow watch on his master, though he carefully concealed the appearance of doing so. First of all, the worthy fellow had gone up to his room and extinguished the gas burner which had been burning for 80 days. He had found in the letter a bill from the gas company, which he had thought it more than time to put a stop to this expense which he had been doomed to bear. The night passed. Mr. Fogg went to bed, but did he sleep? Aouda did not once close her eyes. Passepartout watched all night like a faithful dog at his master's door. Mr. Fogg called him in the morning, and told him to get Aouda's breakfast and a cup of tea and a chop for himself. He desired Aouda to excuse him from breakfast and dinner, as his time would be absorbed all day in putting his affairs to rights. In the evening, he would ask to have a few moments' conversation with the young lady. Passepartout, having received his orders, had nothing to do but obey them. He looked to his imperturbable master, and could scarcely bring his mind to leave him. His heart was full, and his conscience tortured by remorse, for he accursed himself more bitterly than ever of being the cause of the irretrievable disaster. Yes, if he had warned Mr. Fogg and had betrayed Fix's projects to him, his master would certainly have not given the detective passage to Liverpool, and then... And Passepartout could hold in no longer. "My master, Mr. Fogg," he cried, "why do you not curse me? It was my fault that—" "I blame no one," returned Phileas Fogg with perfect calmness. "Go." Passepartout left the room and went to Aouda, to whom he delivered his master's message. "Madam," he added, I can do nothing myself, nothing. I have no influence over my master, but you, perhaps." "What influence could I have?" asked Aouda. "Mr. Fogg is influenced by no one. Has he ever understood that my gratitude to him is overflowing? Has he ever read my heart? My friend, he must not be left alone in an instant. You say he is going to speak with me in this evening?" "Yes, madam, probably to arrange for your protection and comfort in England." Yo, hi Kira. Oh. "We shall see," replied Aouda, becoming suddenly pensive. Throughout this day, Sunday, the house in Sawyville Row was as if uninhabited, and Phileas Fogg, for the first time since he lived in that house, did not set out for his club when Westminster clock struck 11:30. Why should he present himself at the Reform? His friends no longer expected him there. As Phileas Fogg had not appeared in the saloon on the evening before, Saturday, the 21st of December, at 9:15, he had lost his wager. It was not even necessary that he should go to his bankers for the £20,000, for his antagonists already had his cheque in their hands, and they had only to fill it out and send it to the Barings to have the amount transferred to their credit. Mr. Fogg, therefore, had no reason for going out, and so he remained at home. He shut himself up in his room, and busied himself putting his affairs in order. Passepartout continuously ascended and descended the stairs. The hours were long for him. He listened at his master's door and looked through the keyhole, as if he had a perfect right to do so, and as if he feared that something terrible might happen at any moment. Sometimes he thought of Fix, but no longer in anger. Fix, like all the world, had been mistaken in Phileas Fogg, and had only done his duty in tracking and arresting him. While he, Passepartout, the thought haunted him, and he never ceased cursing his miserable folly. Finding himself too wretched to remain alone, he knocked at Aouda's door, went into her room, seated himself without speaking in a corner, and looked ruefully at the young woman. Aouda was still pensive. About 7:30 in the evening, Mr. Fogg sent to know if Aouda would receive him, and in a few moments found himself alone with her. Phileas Fogg took a chair and sat down near the fireplace, opposite Aouda. No emotion was visible on his face. Fogg returned was exactly the Fogg who had gone away. There was the same calm, the same impassibility. He sat several minutes without speaking. Then, bending his eyes on Aouda, "Madam," said he, Will you pardon me for from bringing you to England? Mr. Fogg, replied Alda, checking the pulsations of her heart. Please let me finish, returned Mr. Fogg. When I decided to bring you far away from the country which was so unsafe for you, I was rich, and counted on putting a portion of my fortune at your disposal. Then your existence would have been free and happy. But now I am ruined. I know it, Mr. Fogg, replied Alda. And I ask you in turn, will you forgive me for having followed you, and who knows, for having, perhaps, delayed you, and thus contributed to your ruin? Madam, you could not remain in India, and your safety could only be assured by bringing you to such a distance so that your persecutors could not take you. So, Mr. Fogg, resumed Alda, not content with rescuing me from a terrible death, you thought yourself bound to secure my comfort in a foreign land. Yes, madam, but circumstances have been against me. Still, I beg to place the little that I have left in your service. But what will become of you, Mr. Fogg? As for me, madam, replied the gentleman coldly, I have need of nothing. But how do you look upon the fate, sir, which awaits you, as I am in the habit of doing? At least, said Alda, one should not overtake a man like you. Your friends, I have no friends, madam. Your relatives, I have no longer any relatives. I pity you then, Mr. Fogg, for solitude is a sad thing, with no heart to which to confide your griefs. They say, though, that misery itself, shared by two sympathetic souls, may be borne with patience. Then they so, madam. Mr. Fogg, said Alda, raising and seizing his hand. Do you wish at once a kinswoman and a friend? Will you have me for your wife? Mr. Fogg at this moment rose in his turn. There was an unwanted look in his eyes, and a slight trembling of his lips. Alda looked into his face. The sincerity, rectitude, firmness, and sweetness of this soft glance of a noble woman, who could dare to save him to whom she owed all, at first astonished, then penetrated him. He shut his eyes for an instant, as if to avoid her look. When he opened them again, I love you, he said simply. Yes, by all that is holiest, I love you, and I am entirely yours. Ah, cried Alda, pressing his hand to her heart. Passepartout was summoned and appeared immediately. Mr. Fogg still had Alda's hand in his own. Passepartout understood, and his big round face became as radiant as the tropical sun in its zenith. Mr. Fogg asked him if it was not too late to notify the Reverend Samuel Winston of Marylebone Parish that evening. Passepartout smiled his most genial smile and said, Never too late. It was 5 minutes past 8. Will it be for tomorrow, Monday? For tomorrow, Monday, said Mr. Fogg, turning to Alda. Yes, for tomorrow, Monday, she replied. Passepartout hurried off as fast as his legs could carry him. In which Phileas Fogg's name is once more at a premium on change. It is time to relate what a change took place in the English public opinion when it transpired that the real bank robber, a certain James Strand, had been arrested on the 17th day of December at Edinburgh. 2 days before, Phileas Fogg had been a criminal, who was desperately followed up by the police. Now he was an honourable gentleman, mathematically pursuing his eccentric journey round the world. The papers resembled their discussion about the wager. All those who had laid bets for and against him revived their interest as if by magic. Phileas Fogg bonds again became negotiable, and many new wagers were made. Phileas Fogg's name was once more a premium on change. 5 of his friends at the Reform Club passed these 3 days in a state of feverish suspense. Would Phileas Fogg, whom they had forgotten, reappear before their eyes? Where was he at this moment? The 17th of December, the day of James Strand's arrest, was the 76th day since Phileas Fogg's departure, and no news of him had been received. Was he dead? Had he abandoned the effort, or was he continuing his journey along the route agreed upon? Would he appear on Saturday, the 21st of December, at a quarter before 9 in the evening, on the threshold of the Reform Club saloon? The anxiety in which, for 3 days, London society existed cannot be described. Telegrams were sent to America and Asia for news of Phileas Fogg. Messengers were dispatched to the house in Savile Row morning and evening. No news. The police were ignorant what had become of the detective Fix, who had so unfortunately followed up a false scent. Bets increased, nevertheless, in number and in value. Phileas Fogg, like a racehorse, was drawing his last turning point. The bonds were quoted no longer at 100 below par, but at 20, 10, and at 5. And paralytic old Lord Albemarle bet even in his favour. A great crowd was collected in Pall Mall and the neighbouring streets on Saturday evening. It seemed like a multitude of brokers permanently established around the Reform Club. Circulation was impeded, and everywhere disputes, discussions, and financial transactions were going on. The police had great difficulty in keeping back the crowd. As the hour when Phileas Fogg was due approached, excitement rose to its highest pitch. The 5 antagonists of Phileas Fogg had met in the great saloon of the club. John Sullivan and Samuel Philippin, the bankers, Andrew Stark, the engineer, Arthur Rolfe, the director of the Bank of England, and Thomas Flanagan, the brewer. One and all waited anxiously. When the clock indicated 20 past 8, Andrew Stuart got up, saying, "Gentlemen, in 20 minutes the time agreed upon between Mr. Fogg and ourselves would have expired." "What time did the last train arrive from Liverpool?" asked Thomas Flanagan. 23 minutes past 7, replied Gonthier Rolfe, "and the next does not arrive till 10 minutes after 12. "Well, gentlemen," resumed Andrew Stuart, "if Phileas Fogg had come in the 7:23 train, he would have gotten here by this time. We can therefore regard the bet as won." "Wait, don't be too hasty," replied Samuel Valentin. "You know that Mr. Fogg is very eccentric. His punctuality is well known. He never arrives too soon or too late, and I shall not be surprised if he appeared before us at the last minute." "Why," said Andrew Stuart nervously, "if I should see him, I should not believe it was he." "The fact is," resumed Thomas Flanagan, "Mr. Fogg's project was absolutely foolish. Whatever his punctuality, he could not prevent the delays which were certain to occur, and a delay of only 2 or 3 days would be fatal to his tour. Observe, too," added John Sullivan, "that we have received no intelligence from him, though there are telegraphic lines all along his route." "He has lost, gentlemen," said Andrew Stuart. "He has 100 times lost. You know, besides, that the China, the only steamer he could have taken from New York to get here in time, arrived yesterday. I have seen a list of the passengers, and the name Phileas Fogg is not among them. Even if we have admitted that fortune has favoured him, he can hardly have reached America. I think he will be at least 20 days behind, and that Lord Albemarle will lose a cool 5,000. "It is clear," replied Gauthier Rolfe, "and we have nothing to do but to present Mr. Fogg's track at Barings tomorrow." At this moment, the hands of the club clock pointed 20 minutes to 9. 5 minutes more," said Andrew Stuart. The 5 gentlemen looked at each other. Their anxiety was becoming intense, but, not wishing to betray it, they readily assented to Mr. Valentin's proposal of a rubber. "I wouldn't give up my 4,000 of the bet," said Andrew Stuart as he took his seat, "for 3,999. The clock indicated 18 minutes to 9. The players took out their cards, but could not keep their eyes off the clock. Certainly, however secure they felt, minutes had never seemed so long to them. 17 minutes to 9, said Thomas Flanagan, as he cut the cards which Rolfe handed to him. There was a moment of silence. The great saloon was perfectly quiet, but the murmurs of the crowd outside was heard, with now and then a shrill cry. The pendulum beat the seconds, which player regularly counted. As he listened to mathematical regularity, 16 minutes to 9, said John Sullivan, in a voice which betrayed his emotion. 1 minute more, and the wager would be won. Andrew Stuart and his partner suspended the game. They left their cards and counted the seconds. At the 40th second, nothing. At the 50th, still nothing. At the 55th, a loud cry was heard in the street, followed by applause, hurrahs, and some fierce growls. The players rose from their seats. At the 57th second, the door of the saloon opened, and at the pendulum had not beat the 60th second when Phileas Fogg appeared, followed by an excited crowd who had forced their way through the club doors, and his calm voice said, "Here I am, gentlemen." In which it is shown that Phileas Fogg gained nothing by his tour around the world, unless it were happiness. Yes, Phileas Fogg in person. The reader will remember that at 5 minutes past 8 in the evening, about 25 hours after the arrival of the travellers in London, Passepartout had been sent by his master to engage the service of the Reverend Samuel Wilson in a certain marriage ceremony which was to take place on the next day. Passepartout went out on his errand enchanted. He soon reached the clergyman's house, but found him not at home. Passepartout waited a good 20 minutes, and when he left the revered gentleman, it was 35 minutes past 8. But in what a state he was! With his hair in disorder and without his hat, he ran along the street as never man was seen to run before, overturning passers-by, rushing over the sidewalk like a waterspout. In 3 minutes he was back in Savile Row again, staggering back to Mr. Fogg's room. He could not speak. "What is the matter?" asked Mr. Fogg. "My master," gasped Passepartout. "Marriage impossible." "Impossible?" "Impossible for tomorrow." "Why so?" "Because tomorrow is Sunday." "Monday," replied Mr. Fogg. "No." "Today, Saturday." "Saturday, impossible." "Yes, yes. You have made a mistake of 1 day. We arrived 24 hours ahead of time, but there are only 10 minutes left." Passepartout had dragged his master by the collar and was dragging him out along with irresistible force. Phileas Fogg, thus kidnapped, without having time to think, left his house, jumped into a cab, promised £100 to the cabman, and having run over 2 dogs and overturned 5 carriages, reached the Reform Club. The clock indicated 9:15 when he appeared in the great saloon. Phileas Fogg had accomplished the journey round the world in 80 days. Phileas Fogg had won his wager of £20,000. How was it that a man so exact and fastidious could have made this error of a day? How did he come to think that he arrived in London on Saturday, the 21st day of December, when it was really Friday, the 20th, the 79th day from his descent? When it was really Friday, the 20th, the 79th day only from his departure. The cause of this error is very simple. Phileas Fogg had, without realizing it, gained 1 day on his journey. This is merely because he had travelled constantly eastward. He would, on the contrary, have lost the day had he gone in the opposite direction, that is, westward. In journeying eastward, he had gone towards the sun, and the days therefore diminished for him as many times 4 minutes as he crossed degrees in this direction. There are 360 degrees on this circumference of the earth, and these 360 degrees multiplied by 4 minutes gives precisely 24 hours. That is the day unconsciously gained. In other words, while Phileas Fogg, going eastwards, saw the sun pass the meridian 80 times, his friends in London only saw it pass the meridian 79 times. This is why they awaited him at the Reform Club on Saturday and not Sunday, as Mr. Fogg thought. And Passepartout's famous family watch which had always kept London time, would have betrayed this fact if it had marked the days as well as the hours and the minutes. Phileas Fogg then had won the £20,000, but as he had spent nearly 19,000 on the way, the pecuniary gain was small. His object, however, was to be victorious and not to win the money. He divided the £1,000 that remained between Passepartout and the unfortunate Fix, against whom he cherished no grudge. He deducted, however, from Passepartout's share the cost of the gas which had burned in his room for 1920 hours, for the sake of regularity. That evening, Mr. Fogg, as tranquil and phlegmatic as ever, said to Alda, "Is our marriage still agreeable to you?" "Mr. Fogg," said she, "it is for me to ask that question. You were ruined, but now you are rich again. Pardon me, ma'am, my fortune belongs to you. If you had not suggested our marriage, my servant would not have gone to the Reverend Samuel Vincent, and I would have not been apprised of my ever and—" "Dear Mr. Fogg," said the young woman, "dear Alda, it need not be said that the marriage took place 48 hours after, and that Passepartout, glowing and dazzling, gave the bride away. Had she not saved her, and was he not entitled to this honour?" The next day, as soon as it was light, Passepartout rapped vigorously at his master's door. Mr. Fogg opened it and asked, "What's the matter, Passepartout?" "What is it, sir? Why, I've just this instant found out." "What?" "That we might have made the tour in only 78 days." "No doubt," returned Mr. Fogg, "by not crossing India." "But if I had not crossed India, I should not have saved Alda. She would not have been my wife, and—" Mr. Fogg quietly shut the door. Phileas Fogg had won his wager, and had made his journey around the world in 80 days. To do this, he had employed every means of conveyance: steamers, railways, carriages, yachts, trading vessels, sledges, and elephants. The eccentric gentleman had throughout displayed all his marvellous qualities of coolness and exactitude. But what then? What had he really gained by all this trouble? What had he brought back from this long and weary journey? Nothing, say you? Perhaps so. Nothing but a charming woman who, strange as it may appear, made him the happiest of men. Truly, would you not, for less than that, make the tour around the world? Oh, damn, we finished it. It's actually the end. Oh, it's actually the end. Yo, we actually finished it. My god. Okay, give me a sec.
Congratulations, everyone, for finishing a book. Let's see which one can we read next. I'll give you the choice to actually choose. As long as you don't choose How to Win Friends, because someone is already reading that. Yeah, maybe one of these two. And then once you open it, for example, let's say the Jungle Book. The Jungle Book is already read now.
Yeah, I thought we saw already.
1984, someone is also reading.
Oh, I just did like 94. I don't think anyone read that yet.
Yeah, I don't think so. So let's open this. Ta-da! Ta-da!
Okay. Yay, new book. Whoa, how fun. Oh, hey, the cover changed. Whoa, table of contents. Oh, Okay, wait, why is it like this? Hold on. No, can I not expand this out? Okay. Time to suffer through page formatting. Chapter 1. I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. Ooh. Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. If you're reading this because you think you might be one, my advice is close this book right now. Believe whatever lie your mom or dad has told you about your birth and try to lead a normal life. Being a half-blood is dangerous, it's scary. Most of the time, it gets you killed in painful, nasty ways. If you're a normal kid reading this because you think it's fiction, great, read on. I envy you for being able to believe that none of this ever happened. But if you recognize yourself in these pages, and if you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately. You might be one of us, and once you know that, it's only a matter of time before they sense it too, and they will come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you. My name is Percy Jackson. I'm 12 years old. Until a few months ago, I was a boarding student at Yanxi Academy, a private school for troubled kids in upstate New York. Am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you could say that. I could start at any point in my short, miserable life to prove it, but things really started going bad last May. When my 6th grade class took a field trip to Manhattan. 28 mental kids and 2 teachers on a yellow school bus, heading to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to look at ancient Greek and Roman stuff. I know, it sounds like torture. Most Yanxi field trips were. But Mr. Brunner, our Latin teacher, was leading this trip, so I had hopes. Mr. Brunner was this middle-aged guy in a motorized wheelchair. He had thinning hair and a scruffy beard and a frayed tweed jacket, which always smelled like coffee. You wouldn't think he'd be cool, but he told stories and jokes and let us play games in class. He also had this awesome collection of Roman armor and weapons, so he was the only teacher whose class didn't put me to sleep. I hoped the trip would be okay. At least, I hoped that for once I wouldn't get in trouble. Boy, was I wrong. See, bad things happen to me on field trips. Like at my 5th grade school, when we went to the Saratoga battlefield, I had this accident with the Revolutionary War cannon. I wasn't aiming for the school bus, but of course I got expelled anyway. And before that, at my 4th grade school, when we took a behind-the-scenes tour of the Marine Road shark pool, I sort of hit the wrong level on the catwalk and our class took an unplanned swim. And the time before that, well, you get the idea. This trip, I was determined to be good. All the way into the city, I put up with Nancy Bobo Fit, the freckly redhead kleptomaniac girl, hitting my best friend Grover in the back of the head with chunks of peanut butter and ketchup sandwich. Grover was an easy target. He was scrawny. He cried when he got frustrated. He must have been held back several grades because he was the only 6th grader with acne and the start of a wispy beard on his chin. On top of all that, he was crippled. He had a note excusing him from PE for the rest of his life because he had some kind of muscular disease in his legs. He walked funny, like every step hurt him, but don't let them fool you. You should have seen him run when it was enchilada day in the cafeteria. Anyway, Nancy Bobfit was throwing wads of sandwich that stuck in his curly brown hair, and she knew that I couldn't do anything back to her because I was already on probation. The headmaster had threatened me with death by in-school suspension if anything bad, embarrassing, or even mildly entertaining happened on this trip. I'm going to kill her, I mumbled. Grover tried to calm me down. It's okay, I like peanut butter. He dodged another piece of Nancy's lunch. That's it, I started to get up, but Grover pulled me back to my seat. You're already on probation, he reminded me. You'll know who will get blamed if anything happens. Looking back on it, I wished I decked Nancy Bobo Fit right then and there. In-school suspension would have been nothing compared to the mess I was about to get myself into. Mr. Brunner led the museum tour. He woke up front in his wheelchair, guiding us through the big echoey galleries, past marble statues and glass cases full of really old black and orange pottery. It blew my mind that this stuff had survived for 2,000, 3,000 years. He gathered us around a 13-foot tall stone column with the big sphinx on top. He started telling us how it was a grave marker, a stele, for a girl about our age. He told us about the carvings on the sides. I was trying to listen to what he had to say because it was kind of interesting, but everybody around me was talking, and every time I told them to shut up, the other teacher chaperone, Mrs. Dodds, would give me the evil eye. Mrs. Dodds was this little math teacher from Georgia who always wore a black leather jacket, even though she was 50 years old. She looked mean enough to ride a Harley right into your locker. She had come to Yancey halfway through the year, and our last math teacher had a nervous breakdown. From her first day, Miss Dodds loved Nancy Bobofit and figured I was devil's born. She would point her crooked finger at me and say, "Now, honey, real sweet," and I knew I was going to get after-school detention for a month. One time, after she made me erase answers out of old math books until midnight, I told Grover I didn't think Mrs. Dodds was human. He looked at me real serious and said, "You're absolutely right." Mr. Brunner kept talking about Greek funeral art. Finally, Nancy Bobofit snickered something about the naked guy on the stele, and I turned around and said, "Will you shut up?" It came out louder than I meant to. The whole group laughed. Mr. Brunner stopped his story. "Mr. Jackson," he said, "did you have a comment?" My face went totally red. I said, "No, sir." Mr. Brunner pointed to one of the pictures on the stele. "Perhaps you'll tell us what this picture represents?" I looked at the carving and felt a flush of relief because I actually recognized it. That's Kronos eating his kids, right? "Yes," Mr. Brunner said, obviously not satisfied, and he did this because... Well, I racked my brain to remember. Kronos was the king god, and... God? Mr. Brunner asked. "Titan," I corrected myself. And he didn't trust his kids, who were the gods. So, Kronos ate them, right? But his wife hid baby Zeus and gave Kronos a rock to eat instead. And later, when Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad, Kronos, into buffing up his brothers and sisters. "Ew," said one of the girls behind me. And so there was this big fight between the gods and the titans, I continued. And the gods won. Some snickers from the group. Behind me, Nancy Bobofit mumbled to a friend, "Like we are gonna use this in real life. Like it's going to stay on our job applications. Please explain why Kronos ate his kids." "And why, Mr. Jackson," Brunner said, "to paraphrase Miss Bobofit's excellent question, does this matter in real life?" "Busted," Grover muttered. "Shut up," Nancy hissed, her face even brighter red than her hair. At least Nancy got pegged too. Mr. Brunner was the only one who ever caught her saying anything wrong. He had radar ears. I thought about his question and shrugged. "I don't know, sir." "I see." Mr. Brunner looked disappointed. "Well, half credit, Mr. Jackson. Zeus did indeed feed Kronos a mixture of mustard and wine, which made him disgorge his other 5 children, who, of course being immortal gods, had been living and growing up completely undigested in the Titan's stomach. The gods defeated their father, sliced him to pieces with his own scythe, and scattered his remains in Tartarus, the darkest part of the underworld. On that happy note, it's time for lunch. Mr. Dodds, would you lead us back outside?" The class drifted off, the girls holding their stomachs, and the guys pushing each other around and acting like doofuses. Grover and I were about to follow when Mr. Brunner said, "Mr. Jackson." I knew that was coming. I told Grover to keep going. Then I turned toward Mr. Brunner. "Sir?" Bruno had this look that wouldn't let you go, intense brown eyes that could have been 1,000 years old had seen every question. You must learn the answer to my question, Mr. Bruno told me. About the Titans, about your life, and how your studies apply to it. What you learn from me, he said, is vitally important. I expect you to treat it as such. I will accept only the best from you, Percy Jackson. Wanted to get angry, this guy pushed me so hard. I mean, sure, it was kind of cool on tournament days when he dressed up in a suit of Roman armor and shouted, "What ho!" and challenged us, point blanks against sword point against chalk, to run to the board and name every Greek and Roman person who had ever lived, and their mother, and what god they worshipped. But Mr. Bruno expected me to be as good as everybody else, despite the fact that I have dyslexia and attention disorder, and I had never made above a C- in my life. No, he didn't expect me to be as good. He expected me to be better. And I just couldn't learn all those names and facts, much less spell them correctly. Mumbled something about trying harder, while Mr. Bernard took one long sad look at the Steely, like he had been at this girl's funeral. He told me to go outside and eat my lunch. The class gathered on the front steps of the museum. There we could watch the foot traffic along Fifth Avenue. Overhead, a huge storm was brewing, with clouds blacker than I've seen over the city. I figured maybe it was global warming or something, because the weather all across New York State had been weird since Christmas. We've had massive snowstorms, flooding, wildfires from lightning strikes. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the hurricane blowing in. Nobody else seemed to notice. Some of the guys were pelting pigeons with Lunchable crackers. Nancy Boba Fett was trying to pickpocket something from a lady's purse. And of course, Mrs. Dodds wasn't seeing a thing. Grover and I sat on the edge of the fountain, away from the others. We thought that maybe if we did that, everybody wouldn't know that we were from that school, the school for loser freaks who couldn't make it elsewhere. Detention? Grover asked. Nah, I said. Not from Brunner. I just wish he'd laid off me sometimes. I mean, I'm not a genius. Grover didn't say anything for a while. Then, when I thought he was gonna give me some deep philosophical comment to make me better, he said. To make me feel better, he said. Can I have your apple? I didn't have much of an appetite, so I let him take it. I watched the stream of cabs going down Fifth Avenue and thought about my mom's apartment, only a little way uptown from where we sat. I hadn't seen her since Christmas. I wanted so bad to jump in a taxi and head home. She'd hug me and be glad to see me, but she'd be disappointed too. She sent me right back to Yancy, remind me that I had to try harder, even if this was my sixth school in 6 years, and I was probably going to be kicked out again. I wouldn't be able to stand that sad look she'd give me. Mr. Bernard parked his wheelchair at the base of the handicapped ramp. He ate celery while he read a paperback novel, a red umbrella stuck up on the back of his chair, making it look like a motorized cafe table. I was about to unwrap my sandwich when Nancy Boba Fett appeared in front of me with her ugly friends. I guess she'd gotten tired of stealing from the tourists and dumped her half-eaten lunch in Grover's lap. Oops, she grinned at me with her crooked teeth. Her freckles were orange as if somebody had spray-painted her face with liquid Cheetos. I tried to stay cool. The school counselor has told me a million times, count to 10, get control of your temper. But I was so mad my mind went blank. A wave roared in my ears. I don't remember touching her, but the next thing I knew, Nancy was sitting on her butt in the fountain, screaming. Percy pushed me. Mrs. Dawes materialized next to us. Some of the kids were whispering, "Did you see the water? Like it grabbed her?" I didn't know what they were talking about. All I knew was that I was in trouble again. As soon as Mrs. Dodds was sure poor little Nancy was okay, promising to get her a new shirt at the museum, gift shop, etc., etc., Mrs. Dodds turned on me. There was a trumpet fire in her eyes, as if I've done something she'd been waiting for all semester. Now, honey. I know, I grumbled. A month erasing workbooks. That wasn't the right thing to say. How at me, Mrs. Dodds said. Wait, Grover yelped. It was me. I pushed her. I stared at him, stunned. I couldn't believe he was trying to cover for me. Mrs. Dodds scared Grover to death. She glared at him so hard his biscuit chin trembled. I don't think so, Mr. Underwood, she said. But you will stay here. Grover looked at me desperately. It's okay, man, I told him. Thanks for trying. Honey, Mrs. Dodds barked at me. Now. Nancy Bobblefitt smirked. I gave her my deluxe I'll kill you later stare. Then I turned to face Mrs. Dodds, but she wasn't there. She was standing at the museum entrance, way at the top of the steps, gesturing impatiently at me to come on. How'd she get there so fast? I have moments like that a lot, when my brain falls asleep or something, and the next thing I know I've missed something, as if a puzzle piece fell out of the universe and left me staring at the blank place behind it. The school counselor told me that this was part of the ADHD, my brain misinterpreting things. I wasn't so sure. I went after Mrs. Dodds. Halfway up the steps, I glanced at Grover. He was looking pale, cutting his eyes between me and Mr. Burner, like he wanted Mr. Burner to notice what was going on. But Mr. Burner was absorbed in his novel. I looked back up. Mrs. Dodds had disappeared again. She was now inside the building, at the end of the entrance hall. Okay, I thought, she's gonna make me buy a new shirt for Nancy at the gift shop. But apparently that wasn't the plan. I followed her deeper into the museum. When I finally caught up to her, we were back in the Greek and Roman section. Except for us, the gallery was empty. Mrs. Dodds stood with her arms crossed in front of a big marble frieze of the Greek gods. She was making this weird noise in her throat, like growling. Even without the noise, I would have been nervous. It's weird being alone with the teacher, especially Mrs. Dodds. Something about the way she looked at the frieze, as if she wanted to pulverize it. You've been giving us problems, honey, she said. I did the safe thing. I said, Yes, ma'am. She tugged on the cuffs of her leather jacket. Did you really think you would get away with it? The look in her eyes was beyond mad. It was evil. She's a teacher, I thought nervously. It's not like she's going to hurt me. I said, I'll try harder, ma'am. Thunder shook the building. We are not fools, Percy Jackson, Mrs. Dodds said. It was only a matter of time before we find out. Confess, and you will suffer less pain. I didn't know what she was talking about. All I could think of was that the teachers must have found the illegal stash of candy I had been selling out of my dorm room. Or they realized I got my essay on Tom Sawyer from the internet without ever reading the book, and now they were going to take away my grade. Or worse, they were going to make me read the book. Well, she demanded. Ma'am, I don't... Your time is up, she hissed. Then the weirdest thing happened. Her eyes began to glow like barbecue coals. Her fingers stretched, turning into talons. Her jacket melted into large leathery wings. She wasn't human. She was a shriveled hag with bat wings. Okay, give me a sec. Hello. We had to restart the live due to some technical issues, but hello, hello. Yeah, okay, wait, let me zoom the thing back in. Okay. Hello. Oh, just continue. Then things got even stranger. Mr. Burner, who'd been out in front of the museum a minute before, wheeled his chair into the doorway of the gallery, holding a pen in his hand. "What ho, Percy!" he shouted, and tossed the pen through the air. Mr. Dodds lunged at me. With a yelp, I dodged and felt talons slash the air next to my ear. I snatched the ballpoint pen out of the air, but when it hit my hand, it wasn't a pen anymore. It was a sword, Mr. Burner's bronze sword, which he always used on tournament day. Mrs. Dodds spun towards me with a murderous look in her eyes. My knees were jelly. My hands were shaking so bad that I almost dropped the sword. She snarled, "Die, honey." Then she flew straight at me. Absolute terror went through my body. I did the only thing that came naturally. I swung the sword. The metal blade hit her shoulder and passed clean through her body as if she was made of water. Hiss. Mrs. Dodds was a sandcastle in a power fan. She exploded into yellow powder, vaporized on the spot, leaving nothing but the smell of sulfur and a dying screech and a chill of evil in the air, as if those two glowing red eyes were still watching me. I was alone. There was a ballpoint pen in my hand. Mr. Burner wasn't there. Nobody was there but me. My hands were trembling. My lunch must have been contaminated with magic mushrooms or something. Had I imagined the whole thing? I went back outside. It had started to rain. Grover was sitting by the fountain, a Mundial map tented over his head. Nancy Bobofit was still standing there, soaked from her swim in the fountain, grumbling to her ugly friends. When she saw me, she said, "I hope Mrs. Kerr whipped your butt." "Who?" I said, "Who?" "Our teacher, duh." I blinked. We had no teacher named Mrs. Kerr. I asked Nancy what she was talking about. She just rolled her eyes and turned away. I asked Grover who Mrs. Dodds was. He said, "Who?" But he paused at first, and he wouldn't look at me, so I thought he was messing with me. "Not funny, man," I told him. "This is serious." Thunder boomed overhead. I saw Mr. Burner sitting under his red umbrella reading his book, as if he had never moved. I went over to him. He looked up, a little distracted. "Ah, that'll be my pen. Please bring your own writing utensil in the future, Mr. Jackson." I handed Mr. Burner his pen. I hadn't even realized I was still holding it. "Sir," I said, "where's Mrs. Dodds?" He stared at me blankly. "Who?" "The other chaperone, Mrs. Dodds, the pre-algebra teacher." He frowned and sat forward, looking mildly concerned. "Percy, there is no Mrs. Dodds on this trip." "As far as I know, there has never been a Mrs. Dodds at Yancy Academy. Are you feeling alright?" Okay, chapter 2. Oh, what? Three old ladies knit the socks of death. I was used to the occasional weird experience, but usually they were over quickly. This 24/7 hallucination was more than I could handle. For the rest of the school year, the entire campus seemed to be playing some kind of trick on me. The students acted as if they were completely and totally convinced that Mrs. Kerr, a perky blonde woman who I've never seen in my life until she got on our bus at the end of the field trip, had been our pre-algebra teacher since Christmas. Every so often, I would spring a Mrs. Dodd's reference on somebody just to see if I could trip them up, but they would stare at me like I was a psycho. It got so I almost believed them. Mrs. Dodds had never existed. Almost. But Grover couldn't fool me. When I mentioned the name Dodds to him, he would hesitate, then claim she didn't exist. But I knew he was lying. Something was going on. Something had happened at the museum. I didn't have much time to think about it during the days, but at night, visions of Mrs. Dodd with talons and feathery wings would wake me up in a cold sweat. The freak weather continued, which didn't help my mood. One night, a thunderstorm blew out the windows in my dorm room. A few days later, the biggest tornado ever spotted in the Hudson Valley touched down only 50 miles from Yancey Academy. One of the current events we studied in social studies class was the unusual number of small planes that had gotten down in southern squalls in the Atlantic that year. I started feeling cranky and irritable most of the time. My grades slipped from D's to F's. I got into more fights with Nancy Boboflip and her friends. I was sent out onto the hallways in almost every class. Finally, when our English teacher, Mr. Nicole, asked me for the millionth time why I was too lazy to study for spelling tests, I snapped. I called him an old sod. I wasn't even sure what it meant, but it sounded good. The headmaster sent my mom a letter the following week, making it official. I would not be invited back next year to Yancey Academy. Fine, I told myself, just fine. I was homesick. I wanted to be with my mom in our little apartment on the Upper East Side, even if I had to go to public school and put up with my obnoxious stepfather and his stupid poker buddies. And yet, there were things I'd miss at Yancey. The view of the woods out my dorm window, the Hudson River in the distance, the smell of pine trees. I'd miss Grover, who'd been a good friend, even if he was a little strange. I worried how he'd survive next year without me. I'd miss Latin classes too. I miss Latin class too. Mr. Brunner's crazy tournament dates and his faith that I could do well. As exam week got closer, Latin was the only test I studied for. I hadn't forgotten what Mr. Brunner had told me about this subject being life and death for me. I wasn't sure why, but I started to believe him. The evening before my final, I got so frustrated I threw the Cambridge Guide to Make Mythology across my dorm room. Words had started swimming off the page, circling my head, and the letters doing 180s as they were writing skateboards. There was no way I was going to remember the difference between Chiron and Charon, or Polydictis and Polydeuces. In conjugating those Latin verbs, forget it. I paced the room, feeling like ants were crawling inside my shirt. I remembered Mr. Brunner's serious expression, his 1,000-year-old eyes. I will accept only the best from you, Percy Jackson. I took a deep breath. I picked up the mythology book. I'd never asked the teacher for help before. Maybe if I talked to Mr. Brunner, he could give me some pointers. At least I could apologize for the big fat F I was about to score on his exam. I didn't want to leave Yancey Academy with him thinking I hadn't tried. I walked downstairs to the facility offices. Most of them were dark and empty, but Mr. Brunner's drawer was ajar, light from his window stretching across the hallway floor. I was 3 steps from the door handle when I heard voices inside the office. Mr. Brunner asked a question. A voice that was definitely Grover's said, "Worried about Percy, sir." I froze. I'm not usually an eavesdropper, but I dare you to try not listening if you hear your best friend talking about you to an adult. I inched closer. Alone this summer, Grover was saying. I mean, a kindly one in the school. Now that we know for sure, and they know too, we would only make matters worse by rushing him, Mr. Brunner said. We need the boy to mature more. But he may not have time. The summer solstice deadline will have to be resolved without him, Grover. Let him enjoy his ignorance while he still can. Sir, he saw her. His imagination, Mr. Bernard insisted. The mist over the students and staff will be enough to convince him of that. Sir, I can't fail in my duties again, Grover's voice was choked to emotion. You know what that would mean? You haven't failed, Grover, Mr. Bernard said kindly. I should have seen her for what she was. Now let's just worry about keeping Percy alive until next fall. The mythology book dropped out of my hand and hit the floor with a thud. Mr. Brunner went silent. My heart hammering, I picked up the book and backed down the hall. A shadow slid across the lighted glass of Mr. Brunner's office door. The shadow of something much taller than my wheelchair-bound teacher, holding something that looked suspiciously like an archer's bow. I opened the nearest door and slipped inside. A few seconds later, I heard the slow clop, 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 like muffled wooden blocks. Then a sound like an animal snuffling right outside my door. A large dark shape paused in front of the glass, then moved on. A bit of sweat trickled down my neck. Somewhere in the middle of the hallway, Mr. Bernard spoke. Nothing, he murmured. My nerves haven't been right since the winter solstice. Mine neither, Grover said, but I could have sworn. Go back to the dorm, Mr. Bernard told him. You've got a long day of exams tomorrow. Don't remind me. The light went out in Mr. Bernard's office. I waited in the dark for what seemed like forever. Finally, I slipped out onto the hallway and made my way back up to the dorm. Grover was lying on his bed, studying his Latin exam notes like he'd been there all night. Hey, he said, blurry-eyed. You going to be ready for this test? I didn't answer. You look awful, he frowned. Is everything okay? Just tired. I turned so he couldn't read my expression. I started getting ready for bed. I didn't understand what I heard downstairs. I wanted to believe I imagined the whole thing. But one thing was clear. Grover and Mr. Bernard were talking about me behind my back. They thought I was in some kind of danger. The next afternoon, as I was leaving the 3-hour Latin exam, my eyes swimming with all the Greek and Roman names I've misspelled, Mr. Bruno called me back inside. For a moment, I was worried he found out about my eavesdropping the night before, but that didn't seem to be the problem. Percy, he said, don't be discouraged about leaving Yancy. It's for the best. His tone was kind, but the words still embarrassed me. Even though he was speaking quietly, the other kids finishing the test could hear. Nancy Bobofit smoked at me and made sarcastic little kissing motions with her lips. I mumbled, okay, sir. I mean, Mr. Bernard wheeled his chair back and forth, like he wasn't sure what to say. This isn't the right place for you. It was only a matter of time. My eyes stung. He was my favourite teacher, in front of the class, telling me I couldn't handle it. After saying he believed in me all year, now he was telling me that I was destined to get kicked out. Right, I said, trembling. No, Mr. Bernard said. Oh, confound it all. What I'm trying to say, you're not normal, Percy. That's nothing to be. Thanks, I blurted. Thanks a lot, sir, for reminding me. Percy, but I was already gone. On the last day of the term, I shoved my clothes into my suitcase. The other guys were joking around, talking about their vacation plans. One of them was going on a hiking trip to Switzerland. Another was cruising the Caribbean for a month. They were juvenile delinquents like me, but they were rich juvenile delinquents. Their daddies were executive, or ambassadors, or celebrities. I was nobody from a family of nobodies. They asked me what I'd be doing this summer, and I told them I was going back to the city. What I didn't tell them was that I'd have to get a summer job walking dogs or selling magazine subscriptions, and spend my free time worrying about where I'd go to school in the fall. Oh, one of the guys said. That's cool. They went back to their conversation as if I never existed. The only person I dreaded saying goodbye to was Grover, but as it turned out, I didn't have to. We booked a ticket to Manhattan on the same Greyhound as I had. So there we were together again, heading into the city. In the whole bus ride, Grover kept glancing nervously down the aisle, watching the other passengers. It occurred to me that he always acted nervous and fidgety when we left Yancy, as if he expected something bad to happen. But there was nobody to tease him on the green. Before I'd always assumed he was worried about getting teased, but there was no one to tease him on the Greyhound. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I said, looking for the kindly ones. Grover nearly jumped out of his seat. What do you mean? I confessed about eavesdropping on him and Mr. Brunner the night before the exam. Grover's eye twitched. How much did you hear? Oh, not much. What's the summer solstice deadline? He winced. Look, Percy, I was just worried for you, see? I mean, hallucinating about demon math teachers. Grover, and I was telling Mr. Brunner that maybe you overstressed or something, because there was no such person as Mrs. Dodds, and Grover, you're a really, really bad liar. His ears turned pink. From his shirt pocket, he fished out a gubby business card. Just take this, okay, in case you need me this summer. The card was in fancy script, which was murder on my dyslexic eyes, but I finally made out something like Grover Underwood, keeper, Half-Blood Ale, Long Island, New York, 800-009-0009. What's half? Don't say it out loud, he yelped. That's my summer address. My heart sank. Grover had a summer home. I never considered that his family might be as rich as the others at Yancy. Okay, I said glumly. So like if I want to come visit your mansion, he nodded. Or if you need me. Why would I need you? It came out harsher than I meant it to. Grover blushed right down to his Adam's apple. Look, Percy, the truth is, I kind of have to protect you. I stared at him. All year long, I've gotten in fights, keeping bullies away from him. I'd lost sleep worrying that he'd get beaten up next year without me, and here he was acting like he was the one who defended me. Grover, I said, what exactly are you protecting me from? There was a huge grinding noise under our feet. Okay, now. Oh, was I? Oh, I was here. Okay. Bye-bye.